VMF-422, Marine Fighting Squadron 422, VMF-422, was a Vought F4U Corsair squadron in the United States Marine Corps. The squadron, also known as the Flying Buccaneers, fought in World War II, but is perhaps best known for its role in the worst accident in naval aviation history when 22 of the squadron's 23 aircraft were lost flying through a typhoon on January 25, 1944. After being reconstituted, the squadron participated in the Battle of Okinawa. VMF-422 was decommissioned on April 7, 1947. Since that date, no other Marine Corps squadron has carried the lineage and honors of VMF-422. Unit History. Marine Fighter Squadron VMF-422 was commissioned on January 1, 1943, at Naval Air Station San Diego. The squadron's commissioning came at the behest of Order No. 62354 from Commander Air Wing, Pacific, issued in December 1942. On January 27, VMF-422 moved to Marine Corps Air Station Santa Barbara under the command of Major John S. McLaughlin, Jr. to begin training together as a squadron. Initially, the roster consisted of 40 pilots and 120 enlisted men. 3 pilots, Captains Cloyd Rex Jeames, Charles Hughes, and John Rogers, were veterans of combat in the Pacific, all having served in other VMF units from Midway to Guadalcanal. Most of the pilots were new, having earned their wings in 1943 from either Naval Air Station Pensacola or Naval Air Station Jacksonville. These pilots completed carrier qualification training CQT at Naval Air Station Chicago aboard either the USS Sable IX-81 or USS Wolverine IX-64. For the most part, the pilots flew North American S&J trainers or 6F Moan Wildcats until late August, when they were transported to Naval Air Station North Island, San Diego, to take delivery of 24 new Vought F4U Corsairs. They participated in gunnery and bombing training at the Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake in the Mojave Desert. The squadron was declared operational on September 24, 1943, and ordered to San Diego, where the lead echelon of 24 pilots and planes would be loaded aboard the new Essex-class carrier USS Bunker Hill CV-17 for transport to Pearl Harbor, arriving on 3 October. After arrival, the squadron was initially based out of Marine Corps Air Station Yuan, Oahu. However, the squadron's lead echelon was sent by transport to Midway Atoll for advanced air patrol training with Marine aircraft Group 22 MAG-22. There, the squadron suffered its first casualties when First Lieutenants Stafford Drake and Edmund Farrell were killed in a mid-air collision with First Lieutenant William Eichrig. Only Eichrig survived. The deceased pilots were replaced by pilots from the rear echelon. Upon returning to Oahu on December 15, the squadron was issued 24 new F4U-1D Corsairs. They received orders to board the escort carrier USS Kalinin Bay's CV-68 just after the new year. Their destination was Hawkins Field on the island of Batio in Tarawa Atoll in the recently captured Gilbert Islands. Arriving on the early morning of January 24, VMF-422 catapulted off the ship to fly to Hawkins Field. Major McLaughlin was met by the Chief of Staff of the 4th Marine Base Defense Air Wing 4th MBDAW Colonel Lawrence Burke, who informed him that VMF-422 was to fly to the island of Funafuti, 820 miles to the southeast, to await their role in Operation Flintlock. Major McLaughlin was provided with weather, navigational, and radio code information for the flight. An escort plane was standard Navy policy for single-engine fighters going on long over-water flights. But despite having formally requested a multi-engine navigational escort plane from the 4th MBDAW commander, Brigadier General Louis G. Merritt, McLaughlin and his pilots were told to make the flight alone. In addition, McLaughlin was not told that the weather report which forecast scattered clouds and rain showers down to their destination, was more than 26 hours old. Some of the radio call signs and navigational radio range frequencies were incorrect as well. Doomed flight. Shortly before 1000 HRS 23 F4U Corsairs took off from Hawkins Field. One of the squadron's aircraft, flown by Lieutenant Robert Scott, had starter trouble and was unable to leave. The remaining Corsairs, which carried enough fuel to last until about 1600 HRS, flew south along the chain of Gilbert and Ellis Islands, headed for their first stop, Nanumea Airfield, the home base of the United States Army Air Force's 30th Bomb Group Heavy. Nanumea was located approximately halfway along the route to Funafuti. But due to a procedural error among the air operations staff at Hawkins Field, neither Nanumea nor Funafuti had been informed of VMF-422's imminent arrival at 12:30 HRS. Still short of Nanumea, the squadron encountered a massive Pacific cyclone measuring nearly 150 miles, 240 km in diameter, and reaching to more than 50,000 feet, 1524 m. Having little choice, the pilots flew into the storm and were immediately blown far to the south and east by the clockwise rotation of the cyclone, which carried them beyond Nanumea. The base had its radar up and running, but with no information that a Marine squadron was in the air did not attempt to make contact. By the time the scattered Corsairs broke out of the first storm front nearly 20 minutes later, they were already more than 50 miles 80 km past Nanumea. In an attempt to find the Nanumea radio range beacon, Major Mac Laughlin made two radical course changes that further broke apart the formation. 5 pilots, Captain John Rogers, Lieutenants John Hanson, Don Walker, Robert Morin, Walter Wilson, and Earl Thompson were missing. Lieutenant Christian Lawson had engine trouble and was forced to ditch in the heaving seas. Against orders, Lieutenant Robert Laynert chose to stay behind and circle the downed pilot while making continual efforts to contact a base. Walker soon rejoined the rest of the pilots, but the other 4 were still unaccounted for. The remaining pilots continued south, hoping to reach Funafuti. Another storm front swallowed them, and at last Mac Laughlin agreed to turn back and try to find either Nanumea or Niue, which was closest to their estimated location. But when they reached the area, Major Mac Laughlin was not among them. The last men to see him alive, as he was making desperate attempts to use his radio, were Lieutenants John Lincoln and Jules Flood. The squadron was now under the command of Captain Cloyd Jeames. He decided that with fuel running low, they should stay together and ditch as one group. Meanwhile, Wilson had miraculously ditched on Niutau east of Nanumea, and Morin had made brief radio contact with both Nanumea and Jeames. He parachuted over Niue, but due to injuries in the bailout, died in the surf. Hansen was the only one of the pilots who managed to get a fix on the Funafuti radio range and landed safely. His unexpected arrival was the first indication to the Navy that a Marine squadron was missing at sea. Jeames and 14 other pilots ditched as the storm drew closer. 2 pilots, Lieutenants Bill Eichrig and Ted Thurnow, were too far away to be reached by raft. Laynert, who had parachuted over the swimming Lawson at the height of the storm when his own fuel ran out, was unable to find the other man. He spent the next 3 days alone on his raft until being found by a consolidated PBY Catalina from Patrol Squadron 53 VP-53 on the early afternoon of January 28. The other 13 downed pilots managed to survive 3 days of heavy wind-whipped seas, severe exposure, and sharks until the afternoon of 28 January. A PBY Catalina out of Funafuti, piloted by Ensign George Davidson, found the tiny band of rafts 143 miles 230 km southwest of Funafuti. They had drifted more than 200 miles 320 km. The landing damaged the flying boat, and only by heroic efforts was the plane kept afloat until they were picked up by the destroyer USS Hobby D-610. A day later, Thurnow was rescued by the destroyer USS Wells D-628. McLaughlin, Rogers, Thompson, Lawson, and Eichrig were never found. In all, 6 pilots died and 22 planes were lost. It was the worst non-combat loss of a Marine squadron in the war. Investigation. A Navy Board of Inquiry was ordered by Rear Admiral John Hoover, commander of Task Group 50.2, which had jurisdiction over Marine air operations in the area. From 27 January to 10 February, 18 witnesses were called to the wardroom of the USS Curtis of VMF-4 in Taro Lagoon. The board concluded that the leading cause was the denial of an escort by the 4th MBDA commander, General Merritt. It also concluded that proper procedures for air operations on Tarawa had not been followed. These factors, along with an outdated weather report, contributed to the loss. The findings and recommendations went up the chain of command to Commander-in-Chief U.S. Pacific Fleet SINCPAC Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, to Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Ernest J. King, and on to James Forrestal, Undersecretary of the Navy at the Pentagon. The recommendations were endorsed at each level, which resulted in letters of censure for several officers, including General Merritt. But likely due to his political connections, Merritt was able to stay clear of any association with the loss of 6 pilots. However, the Navy did take steps to assure that no single-engine plane or unit was unescorted on an overwater flight. By order of SINCPAC, escort planes were official Navy policy for single-engine fighters ferrying long distance over water. The pilots who had survived the disaster had been sent back to the States in December for assignment to other squadrons. Few had ever known what had been the real cause of the loss of 6 of their number. The 6 men lost were officially declared dead by the Navy Department on January 25, 1945. Despite inquiries by relatives, there had never been an official explanation as to the cause of the disaster. John McLaughlin was posthumously given the rank of lieutenant colonel. Reconstitution, combat, and decommissioning. VMF-422 was reconstituted after the disaster under the command of Major Elmer Wren, with Captain Jeans remaining as the executive officer. The remnants of the squadron were sent to Njaba in Eniwetok Atoll on February 19. The surviving pilots and new replacements arrived in March, and a short period of additional training took place over the next few weeks. Among the new replacement pilots was Captain Jefferson J. DeBlanc, a well-known Marine flying ace who had been credited with 8 aerial victories over the Solomon Islands while flying with VMF-112. On May 27, a portion of the squadron was sent to Roynammer to conduct interdiction missions against Japanese bases and shipping in the Marshall Islands. During this period, the Flying Buccaneers hosted Charles Lindbergh in September 1944, and he also accompanied them on 3 strike missions against Vought Atoll. The VMF-422 echelon remained on Roynammer until October 16, when the squadron was reunited back on Njaba to begin missions against Panape. On April 26, 1945, VMF-422 departed the Central Pacific bound for Okinawa. The ground crew arrived at Aishima on May 7 with the aircraft in trace by an additional couple of weeks. During its first combat flights over Okinawa on May 25, the squadron was credited with shooting down 5 Japanese aircraft. On June 29, Captain DeBlanc led a large formation of Corsairs from multiple squadrons against targets on Ishigaki Island. En route to the target, 4 of the formation's Corsairs exploded in the sky because bomb safety wires had worked loose, thus arming the bombs in flight. The squadron lost 10 aircraft during the Battle of Okinawa. During the entirety of the Okinawa campaign, the squadron was credited with 15 Japanese planes shot down. After the war, VMF-422 returned to the United States in November 1945 and was assigned to MAG-22 at Macaz El Toro. At some point, the squadron was transferred to Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point, North Carolina, where it was decommissioned on April 30, 1947.